Hello, everyone, and welcome to our latest webinar. This one is going to be on generative AI revolution for transforming your HR operations. And if you have not been on this series before, this is part two. The first one was focusing on sales teams, and then this one is going to be focusing on HR operations. And then we have our final one coming up in August that is going to be on finance departments. So it's definitely one you won't want to miss. If you did miss the earlier one, not a problem. You don't have to have that information going into this, but it's just really great to know. We do have the recording of that live on our YouTube page. It's also on our LinkedIn page, so you can hop in there and check it out as well. If we have not met before, my name is Ruthie Senanayaka, and I work here at Blueprint on the marketing team, helping organize all of these webinars. And we have gotten some really great feedback on this particular series, and actually people asking about different departments or different industries that they want us to focus on in the future. So if you have suggestions on different areas within a business or within an industry that you'd like us to focus on, feel free to add that in the comments here. You can also easily just send us an email. You can email me, that is Ruthie, Ruthie at bpcs.com, and we'll make sure to compile a list of all of those details and hopefully get more webinars on the schedule. But I want to introduce our speaker that we have here today, Gary Nakanalua. If you have not met Gary, he is an awesome person to meet. Not only is he well decorated in the tech space, but he was recently a speaker at the Data and AI Summit. So very excited to have him here presenting for us. And if you have any questions throughout this session, we want this to be as interactive as possible. So if you have any questions, please do send that to us. You can add it in the comments. No matter what platform you're watching on, we will get all of those questions streaming through, and we will ask them live from Gary. And for some reason, if time runs out, we'll make sure to email you a response as well. But without further ado, Gary, take it away.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ruthie. I appreciate the introduction. For those that may not be familiar with Blueprint, Ruthie, if you'll go to the next slide, we are a technology company headquartered in Bellevue, Washington. We work in a lot of different industries across a lot of different verticals, but because this webinar series is specifically around Gen AI on Databricks, I'll just kind of highlight some of the aspects of Databricks and our partnership with them. Back in 2022, we were Velocity Partner of the Year. And then just recently this year, we were awarded the Data and AI Governance Partner of the Year, which we're incredibly excited about. And then finally, we have a number of brick builder solutions available in the market. For those that may not be aware, that designation from Databricks, it puts a lot of evaluation on the solutions themselves. And so acquiring a brick builder solution designation for an offering is a significant investment from any organization. So that's a little bit about us. Now, what about me? If you'll go to the next slide, Ruthie. So aside from that great introduction that she gave, I thought it'd be fun to just kind of showcase who I am through two truths and a lie. So there are three things on the screen right now. Two of those are truths, and one of them is a lie. So if you guys just want to pop into the chat or the comments and take a guess on which of those three are true, or which of those two are true and which one's the lie. And I'll give everyone a moment. Some of these the lie, I actually wish it was true, but I digress. Cool. So 2 and 3 are true. Interesting, Raf. So it turns out the lie on this screen is number 1. I actually have never been an HR operations manager. In fact, I've never been in HR throughout my career at all. I do, in fact, drive a 800 horsepower Hellcat as my daily driver. And I do, in fact, play in a rock band. I play bass and had the opportunity to open for Clint Black. And we've released 3 albums thus far on vinyl. So, yes, 818 was very specific. And I take a lot of pride in the measurement of that number and seeing how it fluctuates. So, with number one being the lie, meaning not only have I not been an HR operations manager, but I've never been in HR. So why would I specifically want to talk about Gen AI and HR? And it really comes down to I have the honor of getting approached by a variety of customers and various internal departments with just a wide range of gnarly business problems. And so I love demonstrating the power of possibility. And there have been times where I have been internally referenced as Willy Wonka. Thus, the reason you see him on the screen. And I do believe that Gen AI unlocks just an unprecedented number of possibilities for all departments in an organization, including HR. Unfortunately, and if you go to the next slide, Ruthie, based on a recent Gartner survey, it appears a low percentage of HR professionals share my perspective. And there are a variety of reasons for this low adoption. Um, One of them being that for for many of HR professionals, Gen AI is relatively new, and they were only really introduced to it via Chat GPT in late 2022. And so you kind of look at this, there's a low percentage of HR professionals that are even planning to use it, and well over half are not even considering Gen AI over the course of the next year, which is interesting. Now, another major reason for this low adoption is very likely concern for the data itself, privacy and security aspects of the data. And if you go to the next slide, Ruthie. So you may have seen some of these headlines as it relates to ChatGPT, everything from it getting banned by countries, getting banned in schools, um, various government entities banning the use of it. There's also been situations where data that had been provided to ChatGPT had gotten leaked, and other concerns such as an organization's data being used to train the models. That's becoming another concern for organizations. And so if 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 the concern is around the privacy of the data itself, especially within HR, then it doesn't mean you can't leverage Gen AI. It just means we have to think about it differently. And thankfully, which you're going to get to see here in a few minutes, that space is going to stay within in Databricks. And so if you go to the next slide, as Ruthie mentioned, I presented on a very similar topic at this year's Data and AI Summit. And this was for an internal use case of how we leverage Gen AI specifically for recruiting purposes. And I'll actually show you this scenario here in a moment. And we had a lot of learnings. You can go back for a moment, Ruthie. We had a lot of learnings, but it really distilled down to two. If you're familiar with ChatGPT and been following it over the last year or two, prompt engineering, the idea of figuring out the ideal prompt and how to get this large language model to respond in a way that is tailored to what we're looking for. And so there was a big push on not just how to generate these prompts, but there were actual roles within an organization being created where their whole purpose was to create different prompts for use in things like ChatGPT. What we learned is in the context of what we were trying to accomplish from a recruiting talent acquisition perspective, the idea of one major prompt to rule them all didn't work. We spent far too much time chasing everything from very particular words that we used to the way that we ordered the different phrases. And it became this exercise of our just constantly chasing that one ideal paragraph to feed into a large language model. But more importantly, what we also learned is you want to keep your data within your data estate. And what that means is when you, let's say that you're asking for a summarization of an employee's annual review. So you take all of that and you paste it in Chat GPT and you say, hey, summarize this for me. Well, the moment you do that, that data that is very specific to your organization has now left your four walls and is now in the hands of OpenAI, who are the creators of ChatGPT. Now, depending on your trust level with an organization like OpenAI, that may be okay. But again, if you remember just the headlines and some of the horror stories that organizations have experienced, that's not ideal. And so, as a general rule, you'll want to always keep your data within your data estate. In fact, at the Data and AI Summit, the CEO of Databricks made it a point to hammer on that point. Keep your data, don't give it to anyone. It is not only an asset, but depending on what you do with it, it could become a liability. So you want to keep control of that data in your data estate. So let's talk some use cases for a moment. Like I mentioned, one of the first ones is from a talent acquisition perspective. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of follow the experience that a potential employee has all the way up to when they onboard and they start getting involved with the organization. And so from a talent acquisition perspective, we were noticing some interesting patterns internally. So if you take a look at the next slide, Ruthie. So this is by the numbers. And so if you go to our website and all the roles that are listed there, on average, 15 resumes are evaluated from a tech perspective per role. And what happens is our talent acquisition team, we have a phenomenal set of recruiters. But when you're in the technical space, there's a lot out there. Things are constantly changing. There's always new technology. And so evaluating the technical viability of a candidate is difficult. And so what typically happens is as they take these resumes, they send them down to some technical folks, whether it's solution architects, development managers, software engineers, data engineers, just that it gets sent down to these folks. It's not necessarily difficult for folks to review a resume for technical viability, but it does take time. And what we found is on average, it takes 15 minutes to review a resume, which means that when you take all of that, it basically costs $25 per resume for us to review. This is taking in kind of the average salary and hourly rate of these technical folks. So when you take those numbers and you do the calculation, based upon the role, the number of resumes that get sent down to the technical folks to review, including the number of open roles that we have, you can see that it cost us a little less than $10,000 a month to simply review resumes. And on an annualized basis, you can see it's just over $100K a month or a year. And so there are real dollar figures associated with that 15 minutes that it takes these technical folks to review these resumes. And so we wanted to think about it differently. And how can we make it so that our recruiters, who are phenomenal at their jobs, but make their experience a lot easier and not have to send those resumes down for technical review. So Ruthie, what I'll do is I'll share my screen. Awesome. So what you're looking at is Databricks. This is a Databricks workspace. This is a very particular notebook. And I'm gonna walk you through kind of the results. Now to save everyone here, what I did do is hide all the code associated with all of this. I try to make it a point to not show code during a demo. So what you're looking at is first and foremost, for the purposes of this webinar, I'm using GenAI to actually create a resume, a synthetic resume for a make-believe individual. And in this particular case, It created a resume for someone named Alex Johnson. And I worked with the LLM in order to lay out very specific things that we look for, their experience, their skills, education, so on and so forth. And so you can see here, it has generated that resume, which is all well and good. Now, for those of you that may be in professional services organizations, this approach could actually be used to refine the resumes of the employees that you have for the sake of consistency and language and brand. But that's a whole other use case there. So now we have our example resume. First thing first, we want to summarize it. Just give me a really quick summary of the resume itself. So you can see here, I'm using Databricks' latest LLM called DBRX in order to generate this resume, or rather to generate the resume summary. And now that we've got our summary, we're going to basically use a couple different, what I'll call agents, to review the resume, but in a different context each time. So first and foremost, I want to know if the resume itself, if they have the proper amount of experience in alignment with the job description itself. And so here, what I had done is I had told the large language model that I wanted a very specific yes or no recommendation based upon their review. So, and I wanted it to give me a justification for that as well. So you can see that's pretty much what it has done here. It has run through and kind of looked at all the experience that Alex here has and came back with, I am a yes. Awesome. So we got one review out the way, specifically through the lens of experience. But then let's do another review. This time, let's see if there's an alignment from a technology perspective, because our job description calls out very specific technologies that the individual should be familiar with. And so we run it through another agent, still using that DBRX model to do this. But you can see here, it has ran through and generated its review. And interestingly enough, this particular review comes back and says they are a no. So we've got a yes or a no, or a yes and a no going on. So what is a recruiter to do? We run it another agent. This time, this agent is set up to be the technical recruiter and to take in consideration not just the first review, but the second review, as well as some other additional information that I trained it to look at. And so it has come back as a final review and said, no, we do not recommend. But what we also want is, just because this GenAI setup says no, based upon the recruiter themselves, perhaps, they evaluate it slightly different based upon their experience. So should the recruiter decide, hey, I'm still going to do an interview with Alex, we also provide a number of questions that can be asked during the interview. And so all of this exists within Databricks, from the job description itself to the resumes. All of it stays within your data estate, like I talked about earlier. Now, we took this a little bit step further, because you may be looking at this and go, well, are the recruiters supposed to actually go into Databricks and run this notebook and whatnot? The answer is no. And so, Ruth, if you want to flip back over to the slides, what we did is that we put in what I call the last mile, which is we actually took this and created an application on top of it. So if you want to show the slides, Ruthie, or I can too. Okay, well, I'll just show it. It's not flipping over. So the results, what we did was, oh, yep, I'll just do it this way. I'm gonna share my whole screen. Here you all go. So from the results perspective, We built an application that we affectionately refer to as Royale with recruiting. Yes. And what we did was you can see right in here, the recruiter can upload the resume, it'll extract everything out, and then it'll actually submit the candidate. And we added a little bit of character to the application. So if you're familiar with the movie Pulp Fiction, we patterned the reviewers after different characters in the movie. And so this was just a fun exercise for us to go through, but made it just added a little bit of a fun factor for the recruiters themselves. That aside, you can see on the right hand side the overall results of what we did here. So, number one, all the recruiters were using this, which is great. It was also a significant level of reduction in the number of tech reviews of resumes that were required. Now, we didn't fully just implement this and say, cool, no longer can you send resumes to the technical folks to review, but we kept kind of narrowing down. And then as they got more comfortable with the results and how we are incorporating that feedback back into the models themselves, we were able to significantly reduce the number of resumes that get sent to the technical folks. And finally, from a forecast perspective, about a little over 60,000 in savings. So absolutely phenomenal. Now, kind of moving on with the next use case. So we've gone through talent acquisition, and now we're onboarding some new folks, which is always fun and great for an organization. So employee development plans. So a new employee comes in, and let's assume they know a little bit about Databricks, but maybe just in their role, they haven't worked with it much. As a Databricks partner, we look for our folks to have a fairly decent level of understanding in Databricks, regardless of their role within the organization. So whether you're HR, sales, or on the delivery side of the house, there is a level of Databricks understanding that we want our folks to have. And so in this case, what I did was using again that Databricks DBRX model, I had it create an employee development plan. And you can see it's very specific things like how long is this going to take? And then also links to very particular resources along the way. So in this particular case, this is a 90-day development plan for an employee to really learn and understand Databricks. But we also want to take a step further because you'll notice that there's a lot of material like from the Databricks Academy that's being included. But we also wanted it to include resources from YouTube because there's a lot of great resources out there that cover not just Databricks itself, but the underlying technology of Databricks, things like Apache Spark and things of this nature. So this time I ran it through a different model because from a testing perspective, found that going out and grabbing different content from the internet, the Llama 3 model was more effective in this situation than the previous model. So this is an instance where multiple models are being used in order to get to that end state of a complete development plan for employees. So you can kind of see how it updated along the way. So now from an HR department perspective, you can tailor your development plans for employees. And if you have a department that's responsible for like the learning management system and helping out with those things, this is an incredible way to up level that team and really enable them to be a lot more productive and specific in the types of development plans that get put together. So that's that use case. Now, so you have acquired a new employee, you have onboarded that employee, they are working through their development plan, and now they have questions. What are the questions, right? And one of the interesting sort of pieces of feedback that I've gotten from a variety of HR organizations is that well over 90% of the questions that an employee has could be answered by the employee handbook. So, how can we make it so that employees have an experience where they can ask their questions, but leverage the employee handbook as sort of the starting source? So instead of them firing off an email to HR coming back and go, yes, here's our vacation policy, for example. And they may even link to the handbook. Instead, what you can do is actually enable almost a chat interface for the handbook itself. And so I'm going to show that now. So what you're looking at here, I'm actually just going to let this thing load up really quick. Perfect. And I'm just going to I'm going to go ahead and just run this. So this could go down really well, or it could catch on fire in the middle of a demo. So we're about to find out. But so for this use case to demonstrate it, what we did was we loaded up the publicly available employee handbook from Netflix, and it is significant. I'll put the link into the chat, but it's very well regarded. It talks a lot about the culture at Databricks and how to be successful, and just how they think about the world a little bit differently. So what we're doing now is I'm just letting this thing run really quick. When it's all said and done, we're going to end up with a chatbot. And I promised y'all that I would hide the code, but I did not do that in this particular case. So let this run for a moment. So what it's doing is it's going out, getting everything set up. So you can kind of see here how we're just setting up different prompts, chaining all these different things together. And then one of the things that we'll show you here in a moment is not only are we enabling people to get their questions answered via this chatbot, but we also store all of that. We store the questions that they ask, and we store the response that the model has given as well. And a lot of different reasons for that. Some of it from an evaluation purpose, which I'll show you here in a moment, can help you understand how you may have to update certain policies or different language that's being used in an organization to help people understand. Another one is to evaluate how the model is responding back to the employee. Is it just going off the rails and saying some silly stuff, or is it truly being effective at what we're looking for? So it's going to get ready to load up. And then Ruthie, at any point in time, you can jump in with questions because I'm not able to see the chat in this one.
Excellent. While that's loading, then I can go ahead and ask you one of the questions that we got. The first one says, what type of Databricks compute did all of this take for all of the ones that you've been working on?
Yeah, great question. So in this particular case, I ran this with an all-purpose cluster, which is what's considered classic compute in a Databricks world. So if you've been a Databricks customer for over a year, that type of compute is probably what you're accustomed to. And it's effective, especially when you have jobs and things of this nature that take a long time. And so if you guys haven't caught our previous webinar, it was serverless versus classic. So serverless is it just went generally available across all the different services at Databricks. And serverless is phenomenal. It spins up really, really fast. It shuts down really fast, really cost effective. I chose to run classic compute in this particular chatbot because I was optimizing my compute along the way for the sake of speed. And so just really quick before I get to the chatbot, the way I was doing that is this is a tool called Lakehouse Optimizer of ours. And so it gives a lot of information about how your Databricks environment is optimized. And so along the way, as I was looking I include as part of development practices the evaluation of the resources and their usage along the way. So you can just kind of see, like, as I was working on this employee handbook use case, right? My cluster was only active for 27% of the time, which means it was only doing stuff 27% of the time, an hour and a half, as a matter of fact, and sat idle for almost 4 hours, which isn't good. So I went back and you can see I started adjusting and optimizing my cluster usage accordingly. And that optimization leads to really good cost savings along the way and enables organizations to unlock additional use cases. But coming back around over to our chatbot. So here we are. We have our chatbot ready. So we'll just ask it a question like, how much vacation time do I get? So what it's doing is it's taking that, it's actually evaluating the the against the Netflix employee handbook and comes back. So all these other things here on the side that you guys see, this was all of the setup. Going out, grabbing that handbook, breaking it into parts and pieces that makes it a lot easier for these models to navigate and to search for content, and then being able to identify really quickly the content that's relevant to the question, and then using the model to actually form the response into what you can kind of see here. So this was the response that it gave um, based upon the employee handbook that Netflix provides. I can tell you that this is a factual statement and is pretty darn close to exactly how it is in the handbook itself. So we could ask a lot of different questions at this point in time. And the really cool thing about this is that this particular chatbot, it's available 24/7. And so if you're a multinational organization, different time zones, things of that nature, any of the questions that people may have can get answered. And if it's multilingual, also is another thing, is that it can translate as well. Um, and that's a whole other different use case. But you can kind of see it's doing a really good job. As I mentioned before, we, in the context of this accelerator, this particular question, we save it. And we also save what the response was. And so if I take a look at Unity catalog, and I'll just take a look at our particular catalog for this one, I have our chat responses here. And I can actually take a look at some of those as it opens up and gives me an idea of some of the data that exist inside of there. So you can kind of see, like, cool, here's the question and here was the answer that it gave. Now, this is all really cool, but another aspect about Databricks and what's available to you is there is almost a chat GPT like experience that can be overlaid on your data. This was recently released and showcased at the Data and AI Summit, and they call it Genie Spaces. And I took the liberty of creating one. And so what you're looking at is this may, for some of you all, look something like a chat GPT like experience. Here's all the different chats that have gone on over on the left-hand side. And I can ask all kinds of questions at this point in time based upon the data that I configured the Genie workspace to have access to. So, like, for example, what was the top question asked by employees? And this is where you can start to look at patterns, potential updates to different policies and things of that nature. And so it's going through right now, and behind the scenes, it's actually just doing all the technical goodness, SQL queries, things of this nature, and running that and then returning it back. So in this case, the number one question was, how much vacation time do I get? And so this type of interaction enables HR departments to really dig into the data, all this data that your organization is creating, and leverage it in new and interesting ways. You can start to do your own analysis by way of simply asking questions of the data itself. And it is a process. It definitely is a process to sort of showcase this. Something that I've been experimenting with is another workspace. So what I wanted to start to figure out was, as new employees are onboarded, different states, different tax codes, different rules around those types of things, could I automatically identify and flag those sort of changes that I should be aware of from being in HR? And so this is still very much a work in progress, but what I want to demonstrate is how this interaction can change your analysis. So it started with my very first question. Hey, what are the tax differences between the regions of where our employees are located? I started with a sample data set that was available from the Databricks marketplace, and it was around all the sales data for a fictional product company. But included in that data was also employee data. And so it gave me things like their role, when they started with the company, where they're located from a region perspective. So I just started doing this evaluation. And so you'll notice that it comes back and goes, sorry, I don't have any information on taxes. Okay, that's good to know. I need that information. So then I went back and said, "Hey, let me try some things." So I loaded up some tax data that again was available in the Databricks marketplace, and it was weird looking. Like this is I asked a very specific question and it comes back with something weird. I was like, "Okay, I need to do some things differently." Loaded up some more data and said, "Awesome. Cool. Now that I've done that, it returned back the average wage in those particular countries. And then I turned around and said, hey, convert this to USD because I don't know what the monetary symbol is that it's returning back. And so you'll notice it comes back and says, well, I need the exchange rate for these things. So again, I go back to the marketplace and I grab free data set that has all of the or not the translations, but rather the exchange rates, as it were. And so it came back, and then I went through it and did it again. And so, anyways, this was meant to show you the sort of how quickly within the Databricks environment, with a Genie space, for example, you can really start to do some really cool analysis, just leveraging a lot of data that's freely available to you, like I said, like exchange rates. So here I am in the marketplace. So we get that right away. Like this one came from the Federal Reserve. This was the exact data set I used here. So within the context of your Databricks workspaces and your entire data estate, not only do you have access to a lot of supplementary data, but also a lot of access to do an analysis really, really quickly, and also just the sheer horsepower to put together some incredible experiences for your employees. And so with that, I have hit the end of my time. So Ruthie, was there any other questions that I'm not seeing? I'm going to assume no, because I don't see Ruthie. Um, one of the things that I will leave you all with is I've talked a lot about different models that are available out there. I've been talking a lot about DBRX and Llama 3. Um, One of the really cool things about from a Databricks environment perspective is a lot of these new and newer models, they become available within a Databricks environment really, really quickly. For example, just yesterday, Meta announced what it is considering its most capable large language model to date, um, referred to as Llama 3.1. And it is already available to Databricks customers. You can test it out on the playground itself and start to use these things really quickly. So again, if you're leveraging Databricks as the center point of your data estate, then you are in a good hands because you're getting access to all the newest cutting edge models that are available out there. So with that, I know we're just about at time. Is there any other questions before I turn it back over to Ruthie to close it out. And as you can see, Ruthie linked all the different webinars from the previous one. So previous one was GenAI and transforming your sales team. I had also mentioned the classic versus serverless on Databricks as well. And then we've got some new ones coming up soon as well. So we'll be able
Awesome. Gary, confirming you can hear me this time? Perfect. We did have one more question that came through. It says, can you test the different models available?
You can. I'll show you all really, really quick here, so you get an idea of what that, when I say that, what that means. So within Databricks itself, so this should look familiar. We were just in here. There's actually over here on the left, they call it the playground. Very similar interface to what I showed you in the Genie workspace. But the cool thing about this is all the different models that are available from a Databricks Foundation model serving perspective are all available here. And what you can do is actually ask questions like, what is the most effective way of using Databricks? So we'll just ask that question of, let's say, DBRX. Let it go. So one, you can see just how fast it is. And because it's the playground, it's telling you like how many tokens are being used and how fast it was. So when you're evaluating these different models, well, what if I do the same thing with the latest one, like I just talked about, Llama 3.1, and ask it the same thing? What is the most effective way of leveraging Databricks? So again, you can see that it's doing its thing. It's actually running slower than the Databricks DBRX model in this particular case. Speed isn't necessarily the only thing to compare, things like accuracy and whatnot. But the point of this is that you can see how this one is actually performing significantly slower than when we did it with DBRX. And so it's a really cool way of just kind of evaluating the effectiveness of the model, the speed of the model, and how well it's dealing with, token usage and things like that. So for whomever asked that, hopefully that answers your question. But it's a really great way to get started and check out the different models. And this is still running, so I won't keep you guys on time to watch this thing do.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Gary. If anyone has further questions, we welcome you to email us at info@bpcs.com, or you can email me directly. That's ruthie@bpcs.com, and we'll make sure to get the answer over to you, and Gary will answer it himself. So we are also excited to share our upcoming webinar that Gary will be hosting. And this one is part 3, the final stage of our series. And this one is going to be on finance, the finance department. So how you can leverage GenAI and Databricks for finance departments. If you have any questions you want answered within that webinar, again, you can email me, and that way we have that ready ahead of time to answer live as well. If you have any questions about how you can connect with Gary, you can always look on LinkedIn and connect with him there. I'm sure he loves to talk anything tech, so we welcome you to connect there as well. And if you have questions about Blueprint, please hop on to bpcs.com. We will be posting our future events on there as well. And we encourage you to follow us on LinkedIn, because any new news or events that we have coming up will be posted on there as well. But thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. And Gary, a big thank you for putting on this webinar for us. We hope everyone has an awesome rest of your Wednesday, and we hope to see you on the next one. Bye, guys.
Thanks, everyone.